Hello, and welcome to lesson 5-1. Here we're going to be multiplying binomials. So I'm actually starting this lesson a little further in. So if you could go ahead and turn to page 64, go near problem 16, that's actually where we're going to start today. And I'm going to show you how to multiply two binomial expressions together, first using the box method, then using distributive property, or what we call FOIL. Okay. So today we're going to multiply binomials. So if you take a look at our first expression, we have an x minus 2 times an x minus 3. And then so first we're going to do the box method. So I'm going to take the x minus 2, and as you see, we've written those across the top, and then the x minus 3 we wrote along the side. And so that'll allow us to do a little multiplication to ensure that the x gets multiplied by both the x and the minus 3, and that the minus 2 also gets multiplied by both the x and the minus 3. So if we do that, if we start with x times x, we get x squared. Then we do x times negative 2, we have negative 2x. Negative 3 times x, negative 3x. And finally, negative 3 times negative 2, and that will give us 6. And those are the four terms that we're going to get from multiplying those binomials. But we should notice that we get like terms when we multiply. And so those we're going to be able to combine together. So we will get x squared. But if we combine negative 2x and negative 3x, we get negative 5x. And then we get plus 6. So if we multiply two binomial expressions, we will get a trinomial expression most of the time. Okay, now I'm also going to show you how we can do this using distributive property, or what we like to call FOIL. Okay, so if I take those two binomials again, and I use x minus 2 times x minus 3, okay, we think of it as distributive property because we're going to be taking the x times the x, okay, but that'll give us x squared. We also think of that as being the first times the first, okay, so that's going to be the first part of FOIL. So F is going to stand for the first. Okay, then we want to do the negative, we want to do the x times the negative 3. Okay, so we did x times x, now we're going to do x times negative 3. And those we call the outers. Okay, so negative 3x, call those the outers. Okay, and now we're done distributing the x, so it's time to move on to the negative 2. So then the negative 2 has to get distributed to the x, so negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And finally, we're going to do the negative 2 times the negative 3, and that will give us a positive 6, and we call those the lasts. So we had the inner terms, and then we had the last terms. And that's where we get the phrase FOIL from. So as you can see, we have the same four terms as we had in the box, and we still have to combine the middle terms. Okay, so they're right next to each other, makes it easy. So we get x squared minus 5x plus 6 again. So we use the FOIL method even though it's distributing. The FOIL method will just help us later when we're doing some factoring, and we're going to really focus on getting those outer and inner terms to add up to a certain number, like that negative 5x in the middle. So that's why we'll talk about this in terms of using FOIL. All right, so we're going to practice some now in number 18. Okay, I'm going to use the side to do some of those. And so I want to start with looking at A, B, C, and D, because if you notice, those four problems all contain 7 and 5, but they have different forms of them. We have some where both 7 and 5 are negative. We have one where both 7 and 5 are positive. And then we have different signs. Part B, the 7 is negative, and part D, the 5 is negative. So we're going to look how those answers change and maybe do a little predicting on the third term for those. All right, so I'm going to come up to the top here and start with 18A. So we're going to start with the x minus 7 and the x minus 5. So when we work out these, we do, we're going to start with x times x, of course, which is our x squared. Okay. And then we're going to do our x times negative 5, negative 5x. And then we also have another negative here because it's negative 7 times x, which is negative 7x. Okay, so those two terms, much like our box example, are going to get added together. But then our last times our last is negative times negative. So that, of course, gives us positive. So when we write our final answer and we combine those middle terms together, we get x squared minus 12x plus 35. So keep in mind, we got a plus 35. So now let's look at b, because b is a little different. This time, they're not both negative. Remember, we have the 7 is negative, but the 5 is positive. So think about what our signs are going to be and maybe what our third term is going to look like. Okay. So for part b, we've got x minus 7 times x plus 5. Okay. We're going to use our FOIL method. So first times the first, x squared, outers, x times 5, 5x, inners, negative 7 times x, negative 7x. And finally, last times the last, this time it's negative 7 times positive 5, so negative 35. Again, we want to combine our middle terms. This time, however, it's 5x minus 7x, so our middle term now is going to be negative 2x. So that changed. And our last term changed as well because now it's negative 35. So the signs of the binomials can help us predict the signs of the trinomial. Okay, so in part C, everybody's positive. So what do you think that's going to mean for our products? Well, let's see. We have x plus 7 times x plus 5. And we go first times the first. It gives us x squared. And now our outers and inners. They're both positive. Everything looks clean. We get outers plus 5x. And inners plus 7x. You might be able to just do that part in your head. And then 7 times 5 would be 35. So we have x squared plus 12x, if we add those terms together, and plus 35. So notice that all of our terms were also positive. Okay, and now let's look at part D, which is a positive 7, but a negative 5. So that should resemble, will that resemble more like A, B, or C? That's what you want to think about. Okay, so let's try part D. And we have x plus 7, and we have times x minus 5. And we'll go first times the first, of course, is x squared. And then our outers this time, it's actually negative, so it's negative 5x. Our inners are still positive, plus 7x, but that'll be a subtraction when we combine. And then 7 times negative 5, back to negative for our third term again. So if we were to combine our middles like we did in all of our other problems, this time, however, we're going to get a subtraction. So x squared plus 2x minus 35. Okay. So you can see that our third term is sometimes positive, is sometimes negative. Our middle term is sometimes positive and sometimes negative. Sometimes we're adding in the middle, sometimes we're subtracting in the middle. So E and F are independent of each other, but I do want to show you those two problems because they are the first time you're seeing an x that is not just a 1x, it's actually a 4x, and we can look at a couple of those. So let's go in and do part E, and we'll do a blue. So 4x times x, the first times the first, this time we have 4x squared. So your first term doesn't always have a coefficient of 1. Okay, now our outers is 4x times 3. So that's going to be 12x. And our inners is 1 times x, so that's 1x. And our last is 1 times 3, which is 3. So I'll write the answer underneath number 19. So we end up with 4x squared plus 13x plus 3. Okay. And our last one, we are going to look at 2x minus 1 times 3x plus 2. So if we do first times the first, we get 2x times 3x, 6x squared. Outers are both positive, 2x times 2, 4x. Inners, we have a negative 1 times a 3, so that makes negative 3x. And last is negative 1 times 2. So that's going to be negative 2. So when we combine our middles, we have 6x squared plus 1x for 4x minus 3x minus 2. So solve our problems today, we had two binomials, and they're going to multiply to make a trinomial. Okay, tomorrow we'll see some problems where we might multiply and only get a binomial. And those are some special cases that we'll look at tomorrow. So for your assignment, I would like you to do the practice problems. So starting at 5-1, and you can use the box if you want to, but you don't need to. You can use distributive and FOIL. And check your answers on the PDF and be ready with questions when I see you in class.